Hello everyone and welcome to the last video of chapter 11 and also the last video of this class, which is called Object-Oriented Programming and more specifically S3. So in this video I will try to illustrate the basic concepts of object-oriented programming, what that is, and we will look at a very simple instance of object-oriented programming in R, which is called S3. All right. Then let's get started. And let me start with a question to you. Have you ever wondered why the print function, for example, or other function like summarize or so in R actually always know what to print and also print different things? So here I use on the left side the print function on a linear model, and then what it returns is the formula of the linear model and then the intercept and the coefficient. So it actually prints a model output. If I apply the print function to a plot, here it's a plot called plot_cars, it actually plots my ggplot. And you see in both lines of code the exact same function was used, print, and then in brackets just the object. And I don't need to tell it whether, or in this line of code, I don't tell it whether I want to print a plot or a model or whatever. It automatically, kind of automatically, it seems like, recognizes what to do. So I asked you, did you ever wonder why print does two different things here, even though we don't specify it in this very line of code? So the truth is, what's actually happening, it's not this very same function for both. It just looks like this, a little bit disguised, and we will get to the bottom of that throughout the video. So what's here happening on the left side actually is a function or something called print.lm. And here we have something print.ggplot. So actually, these two lines of code actually are perfectly fitting to what we have here. So print.lm function seems like a function for a linear model, and for print.ggplot for a ggplot. So these two things actually differ. And these are print.lm and print.ggplot are called methods, which is a special type of function, and we will get to that a little bit later in this video. So now these methods are used under the hood, but we didn't write them in our code. We just wrote print model cars on the left side, for example. So how does our print function then know when to use which method? We have a lot of methods, for example, in the print function. I will show this later to you. But how did R know that I want to print a plot here and then I want to print a model here on the left side? Well, the solution is a thing called a class. Every object in R, so if I create a plot or a model or a vector, every object, anything that we can have in R contains the relevant information here, namely a class. So everything has a class in R. And here, for example, in my environment, I have my model and my plot. And with the function class and then the object, I can retrieve the information on about which class an object has. So for example, here, I want to figure out the class of my linear model, and it returns that this has the class linear model. And for my ggplot, actually, it has two classes. It has the class gg and the class ggplot. And the definition of a class, this is important, and here under this link you find a very good and thorough documentation of S3. A class defines a type of object, describing what properties it possesses, how it behaves, and how it relates to other types of objects. So how it behaves, this is important to us because actually it means which method we want to use here. We can assign classes to objects that we create. We can also create new classes by just assigning classes that don't exist. I just showed you that class and then in brackets the object, it always gives you the class of an object, like this, what we just did. And with the simple arrow, this is really, really easy. You just assign the class. So here, for example, I took my model. So you still wrap the class function around, and then you add the arrow and a class that you want to assign. Here I created a new class. I called it linear model, just as a mock example. This is not really meaningful. And then if I retrieve the classes, I can see that the class of this model is actually a linear model. And I told you this before, but it's really important. Objects are not limited to one class. So here with the arrow, I don't only assign the linear model class, but also LM. So we have two classes. And those are not limited to two. An object can have 10 or maybe 100 classes, I don't know, but I would guess that. And this raises the problem or the question, if an object has multiple classes, well, which method to use then? Let's say, just as an example, which is not true, but if an object would have the class ggplot and linear model, this is not can't happen, but if we have had this, which print function would be chosen then to assign that, or print method? Well, here we have some kind of hierarchy of classes. This is always very important. In S3 and also other object-oriented programming systems, they all include some kind of class hierarchy. So let's first think of an abstract example so that we can understand it better in our programming language later. So we have this little cute chimpanzee, and this chimpanzee has a lot of properties and a lot of classes. So first of all, it's a creature, it's a living being. Then it's a mammal, so German a Säugetier. All mammals are also creatures, but not all creatures are mammals. So this is kind of a subclass. Mammal is a subclass of creatures. And similar to this, it's a monkey. So monkeys are subclasses of mammals. Every monkey is a mammal. Not every mammal is a monkey, okay? And you guessed it from now, so he's also a primate and a chimpanzee. Well, this is a kind of pyramid hierarchy, and it works exactly like this in S3 and also in other hierarchical structures of classes. So let's transfer this example to R. Let's say we have a pooled OLS model and it has multiple classes or multiple properties. A pooled OLS model, you don't need to know what this is, but I can tell you it's a statistical model, it's a linear model. Every linear model is also a statistical model, but not the other way around. It's an OLS model, so an ordinary least square model. Each OLS model is also a linear model, but not the other way around. And last but not least, I told you this at the beginning, it's a pooled OLS model. So we could assign 4 classes to our pooled OLS model. Let's say this is our object. We assign 4 classes. First, and this is important, we start from the most specific, the lowest in the hierarchy, or you could call it the highest. First, it's a pooled OLS, and it's also an OLS model, it's a linear model, it's a statistical model. I just made up these classes. And then we have these 4 classes assigned. And now if we apply the print function to our OLS model, it first checks whether we have a function or a method specified for pooled OLS models. So a print.pooledOLS model, method, sorry. So the first is here on the very left. If yes, we use it. So then we print our output. If no, we move up one step in our hierarchy. We look whether we have a print.OLS function. If yes, we use it. If no, we look for print.lm, and this function actually exists. So then we would use it, and the iteration is stopped. If we wouldn't have the print.lm method, we would of course look for the sm, and so on and so forth. So we start from the most specific class and then move up in this hierarchy. And the structure of hierarchies, it's very simple in S3, not that it's easy to understand, but it's simple how you assign this hierarchy. It is just by the order how things are in this list here. So this is important because in other programming languages you could, this is maybe a little bit more complex or maybe better. Some people would call it better, but here it's simple, simple to use, but yeah, it's important to state that this order of first this, then this, then this, then this sets the hierarchy of classes for an object. So now with the classes assigned, we could write methods for these classes, just like the print.lm method or the print.ggplot method. But it's important to state, and now we get to the methods in a little bit more detail. If we would write this code from the beginning with the dot, this code would actually fail, or it would return an error, because these print.lm and print.ggplot are not regular typical functions that you know, but they are methods, Ask3 methods. And what are methods? It's a function associated with a particular type of object. So it's a function that takes on only a specific type of object, and that's why we also call it object-oriented programming. So the function print, for example, or summarize, it does a different thing depending on what object is given to this function. And if we actually take a look at how the print function, for example, looks, so the proper or the basic print function, not the methods, it's quite simple on its inside. Look at this. It is just a function that takes on an object, and then the only thing that it does, it uses a method. This is really important. It uses a method of print. And actually it takes on an object that inherits a class. So for example, it takes on something called plot, and it is a ggplot. So it processes this and it uses the method print.ggplot. So for example, here we have a plot, it's called plot_cars, which inherits the class ggplot. I just illustrated this example already. It is put in the print function, the overarching, the bigger print function, not the methods. What it then does, this is very simplified, but it's more important to understand the concept than how it actually or perfectly detailed works. It searches in its methods for an appropriate one, and then we find the print.ggplot method. Nice, this is perfectly applicable. And what then happens is the print.ggplot method is applied or is used by this use method here in the overarching bigger print function. Yes, so this is how this object-oriented way of writing functions and programming works. So maybe I didn't talk about this enough until now. So what is S3 now? Basically, this is just the object-oriented programming system in R that I just illustrated. It is just one of them, and it's quite simple. And also, it does not increase your programming complexity much. So if you write packages or functions, it's not that much more difficult to write it in an S3 object-oriented style, but it facilitates the usability of functions significantly. I mean, imagine if you use the print or summarize or whatever function, you would always need to know which class your object currently has. And it's better if you can, the usability is so much better if you just use the print function all the time and you don't need to know the very specific method. It's also relevant from a development perspective, of course. And if you are interested in coding in general, also learning on, if you know other languages, object-oriented programming is an important concept for other languages like JavaScript and so on. It's important to understand the general concept of this. And I already talked about this previously, briefly. There are also more complex object-oriented systems like S4, S6, and so on. So with that, we conclude with this video and with this lecture series, and we'll look at some practical examples in a couple of days. Thank you.